Today is Sunday, March 5th, 2023, and in this video I'm going to talk about resets. I just want to use one specific example of an old world building and just kind of give a general overview of what I think about history resets. And it's such a broad topic, there's no way I'm going to be able to explain everything. And it's one of those topics where you see aspects of it or you get reminded of a certain thing and it applies. One of my favorite it's a little gruesome, but it's just an example that really sticks with me. Well, two things about what I remember from history class and old historical photos, of which it seems like there's an enormous amount of historical photos available today that we didn't get to see back then. So many things were deep in archives, and now that we have the internet, it's a huge blessing when it comes to researching certain topics. And fake history is a really good topic to research because we have an abundance of photo proof. They made up so many lies during school. They told us so many lies about photography, but there's tons and tons of photographical evidence from around the time of the last reset. It's just that history is a bunch of BS, and in order to defend the narrative, they make up an abundance of lies. So one of the things that stuck with me from history class is I always knew that the old-timey photos looked too empty. There'd be these photos of old New York or old Paris, and it's like a ghost town. How do you even get a photo like that? How do you get a huge city like Paris and have it look like a ghost town? Were they supposedly like blocking off areas and like, hey, we're gonna take a picture, nobody be around? That you'll have these grand hotels or grand buildings with hundreds and hundreds of rooms, and there will be like one carriage parked outside, and that's the photo. Or looking down a huge city street, and these photos are from times where the population wasn't supposed to be that big. But why are these huge cities even existing? And that's just one big thing that a lot of people have noticed and probably always felt something was wrong. Why do these old photos feel like ghost towns and the cities look so huge? Another aspect too that just more recently is just how old things already look. It's like in the old photos, stuff already seems old. It doesn't seem new. And it just feels weird. Humans have an ability to feel when something's off. And another one that comes to mind every once in a while about old photos, and they've always talked about it a little bit. You know how they say that they would pose dead bodies? That's another little lie that they use, and similar to how they lie and say, oh, you had to hold still for 5 hours to take a photograph. That's clearly not the case. Since the last reset, they've had photo technology. They just lie about how it was a thing that really existed back then and people knew it existed and it wasn't really crude. Photography is a very advanced technology. You can get such crisp, high quality photographs even hundreds and hundreds of years ago. Anyways, the dead body thing. See, this is just... Fake history is just such a huge and interesting topic, but there's so many little details. So the dead body people, do you know why they had to pose the dead bodies? It wasn't, they come up with weird excuses for everything. That's what these people do. If you have questions, they'll have an excuse for it. So why posing the dead bodies? Well, it's because the population was so low, they had to make up people that didn't exist. So they would pose a dead body, they would dress them up. And you know how you can go to the fair and do this, how a group of friends, you get together and you put on clothes, take a picture, maybe change your outfit, take another picture. That's what they were doing. Somebody's job was to take this dead body, put it in an outfit, take a picture. Somebody else's job was to give that guy a name and write down about his life, say what he did, talk about the battles that he was in. The pen is mightier than the sword. These people, they write an enormous backlog of BS, and they sell that people as truth. They're obsessed with that idea too, how they can create reality by just coming up with ideas, and how they can take a picture and write a story about it, and boom, that person comes to life. They just love that idea. Have you ever wondered, like, why is the media so obsessed with this idea of building characters and then not breaking character? Actors or actresses, they love having a character and then not breaking it. It's because they think that they can create something. They think that they've made something come into reality. Same way, there are an enormous amount of historical figures that probably never existed. It was probably just some story that somebody came up with. But they get so much pleasure in knowing that they can bring things to reality. They can bring something to life with the power of the pen and taking a few snapshots of dead people. So yeah, you know all those old photographs where it's like, oh, this is General so-and-so, or this is the architect who designed all of these fancy buildings. And you look at the photo and you're like, something's wrong about this photo. It looks weird. The person looks dead in the eyes. A lot of those old historical photos, the people literally are dead. They were posing dead bodies, and they admit it. But they'll tell you, oh, that was for like this weird thing. People would die, and then they would want a photograph of them. That's BS. No. Photographing dead bodies was just a big aspect of the history reset, because a big aspect of history resets is fabricating an enormous amount of BS. That is the heart of a history reset, is fabricating tons of BS to explain away everything that's left around after a reset. Okay, so I kind of wanted to start this video with the word, but then I got into a ramble. I have more time to ramble after this, so let's read the chapter for today, and then I'll keep rambling about this. Isaiah chapter 35. The wilderness and the solitary place shall be glad for them, and the desert shall rejoice, and blossom as the rose. It shall blossom abundantly, and rejoice even with joy and singing. The glory of Lebanon shall be given unto it, the excellency of Carmel and Sharon. They shall see the glory of the Lord, and the excellency of our God. Strengthen ye the weak hands, and confirm the feeble knees. Say to them that are fearful of heart, be strong, fear not. Behold, your God will come with vengeance, and God with a recompense. He will come and save you. Then the eyes of the blind shall be opened, and the ears of the deaf shall be unstopped. Then shall the lame man leap as an hart, which is like a deer, and the tongue of the dumb sing, for in the wilderness shall waters break out, and the streams in the desert. And the parched ground shall become a pool, and the thirsty land springs of water. In the habitation of dragons, where each lay, shall be grass with reeds and rushes. And an highway shall be there, and a way, and it shall be called the way of holiness. The unclean shall not pass over it, but it shall be for those, the wayfaring men, though fools shall not err therein. Interesting. That is an interesting part. The wayfaring men, though fools shall not err therein. Like, is that talking about how we're fallen, and that we're fools here, but we won't be in heaven? I just find that the concept, the wayfaring men, interesting there. What do you guys think? No lion shall be there, nor any ravenous beast shall go up thereon. It shall not be found there, but the redeemed shall walk there. And the ransomed of the Lord shall return, and come to Zion with songs and everlasting joy upon their heads. They shall obtain joy and gladness, and sorrow and sighing shall flee away. So a nice optimistic chapter from Isaiah, talking about in the end, heaven. This sounds like heaven. And okay, back to fake history. This is an interesting picture. Well, these are all taken from Albany, Oregon. Even that symbol down there, that spiral. What's going on here? You know what? And I had a thought about these saloon type. I think a lot of times these wood porches and these wood shutter outside looking things, I think that there probably was a stone masonry building behind that, and they were putting up these wooden facades over the building. I think a lot of times those Western style downtowns, they're stone masonry downtowns just with a wooden facade over the front of it, I believe, lots of times. And notice how barren the streets. One thing that's always weird about all these historical photos, the streets are really barren, but then a lot of times there will already be technology like trolleys. And it appears like straight away, one of the first things that these people do after a reset, straight away, one of the first things they do is start putting up power lines. The people in control understand atmospheric electricity, and that there is electricity in the air. Think lightning. What is lightning? It's proof that electricity accumulates in the air. So power lines are a way to passively collect electricity, and it, as far as I can tell, the people in control of this place have always done it. It's like they come into an area and boom, they immediately start setting up electrical wires. So this was a strange picture going on here. Hand in the pocket in the back. But one thing that I noticed about the old photos, so when there's moving pictures, I've noticed when there's like really old movies, it seems like people are very interested, like, hey, what's going on? But for the most part, in really old photos, I think it's really clear that photography was a known thing. And they tell so many lies. They tell so many lies about photography in times past. So let me just debunk some things about photography in times past. Well, one thing is photography is very advanced technology. People think that digital stuff today is really cool. I take a picture with my digital camera today and it looks really cool, but you zoom in and you see that it's like artificial. Things start to get really blurry. The amount of detail you see is like deceptive today. But film photography and film media, just using actual film, is such high quality. There are beautiful old photographs with amazing detail that is sharper than any digital of today. That's one thing to understand. Another thing to understand is it wasn't rare. Most people, it's totally, if this was some crazy new technology, the photos wouldn't look like the way that they look. There's tons of candid shots. There's tons of portraits and silly portraits. And the more you look at old photographs, the more you get surprised by what there is and how much there is and how contradictory it is to what they try to tell you in school. And it goes so far back too in time. Just the thing is obviously, the farther back in time a photograph is, the more rare it is that it's going to survive until today. Okay, so that's some talking about photography technology. These photos are coming in backwards. I'm sorry, from the way that I put them in, so I'll have to explain it. A lot of people talk about how this type of stuff is probably old technology, the weird sphere things that they have everywhere. What's strange about this, though, this is Albany High School, Albany, Oregon. Yeah, a little out of place. We don't really build like this anymore for a high school. But it's incredible what the high school used to look like. This is actually and it was a red brick building. What do you know? This is actually what the Albany High School used to look like. Whoa. They don't build them like they used to, you know? And the ivy, something about the ivy, it takes a long time for ivy to grow that much up a building. But something about the Ivy Leagues, it makes me think of the fact that the ivy is really, the root systems are really old of a lot of these ivies. I think that there is something to the fact that these buildings are so covered in ivy. Like the windows look almost sealed shut with ivy there. They had to come into these buildings and refurbish them after they had been overgrown a lot of times. A big thing about the photos that you notice is that the landscaping looks awkward, or there will be literally no landscaping. Because I think a lot of times it was completely overgrown. And so what they had to do is they had to come in and remove everything. But you'll notice that they take the photographs before they put new landscaping in. It's really awkward, the old photos. You have these grand palaces, but there's not a little bit of landscaping anywhere. Who builds a grand palace and then there's no landscaping? And it's not always like that. Sometimes there will be some trees around and stuff, but a lot of times in the old photos, it looks like it's just dirt everywhere, and then these grand buildings. But there is something about these old ivy, the old ivy plants. How long does it take ivy to grow that big? A lot of times it's really hard. It's really, really hard to find historical information on the construction of these places. So this is one of the easiest way to figure out that history is bullshit, excuse my language, is to go try to find proof of construction, and you won't find it. In the very, very, very rare case that they have, quote unquote, photographical proof of construction, The skies are whited out, and they'll have these like awkward looking cranes put in sometimes. Anyways, but I would say 99 times out of 100, they have no proof of construction, nothing but stories. And a lot of times their stories of construction make no sense. They say, oh, it was built in 3 years. They don't even try to make it believable. I'll look into it more, the more specifics. You might notice some similarities. The backstories, you get really upset after a while to notice that they play the same tricks over and over. The Chicago fire, the San Francisco fire. How many times can they take a place and light it on fire and use that as the excuse for why we don't have these buildings anymore? And a lot of times it's weird too, because it's like stone buildings being lit on fire. Anyways. There was a push to replace it for reasons that will sound familiar. They claim, so the reason that they claim they had to get rid of this building is they said it wasn't good enough. They claim that this wasn't good enough to be a high school. That's why they had to get rid of it. It lacks proper facilities in the study hall and recitation rooms, cloakrooms, and hall space. So what I would say is, well, why would you build such a massive building that lacks all the things that a school has? Maybe it never was a school to begin with. That's what I propose. And that's how a lot of these places were. They never were what they are today to begin with. It's just that it's been repurposed. The old sanatoriums, those were not built for crazy people to live in. They were not. A lot of times jails look like castles. And I think that they just took old rooms and just reconverted it into jail cells. They had an overabundance of buildings, so many of them had to be repurposed. And I guarantee you that this thing just wasn't, it probably wasn't a school. This probably was somebody's mansion. Probably not a school, but it got turned into a school. There's a reason it didn't have study hall or recitation rooms, cloakrooms, and hall space. There was no gymnasium because it never was a school, so that's why it didn't have a gymnasium. There wasn't a lunchroom because it never was a school. If you were going to build a school, you would build a lunchroom in there. Do you see what I'm getting at? Crowded. Imagine saying that it's crowded when you have a castle. So this is what it looks like today. I don't know what went on there. So this is talking about, this is the main building for today's video, but dime a dozen. You can look at almost any city in America basically has this same sort of origin story where horse and buggy people allegedly come in and build an amazing stone masonry government building. Who does that? Who comes to a new area and says, I'm going to build a Greco-Roman style stone masonry building with a gilded dome on top? This thing had a gilded dome on top. That is not how societies begin. These buildings are end society buildings. These buildings are monuments of a great society that was already here. And what happens is that they stick around and civilizations come and go, and new peoples inhabit these buildings, refurbish them, and a lot of times demolish them. The amount of these buildings that used to exist dwarfs in comparison what we had today. Research things like Dresden. The whole reason that they bomb places like Dresden and just totally level these cities that used to be full of these buildings is to obscure history, because they cannot explain it away. They know that all they can do is lie about it and hope people believe their BS. So a lot of times they just have to get rid of these buildings because they can't maintain them all. They're all run down today. I live in a place with these old buildings. They're so often run down. They're empty. They're missing windows. They cannot keep them all refurbished, so they just eventually tear them down. We are living on the shoulders of giants, and we will never reach the same level that societies in times past have reached here. It's just that those societies come and go, and then we are the ones who take their place. And those in control, the Freemasons, who got all this masonry for free, the Freemasons who are in control of the media today, They're the gatekeepers of this tradition of coming into these old buildings and selling a fake story about how you built it 3 years ago. That's the gist of it. Look, they claim that this building was built in 3 years. Do you believe that? There's like 5 children running around. Or wait, 2 children, 2 dogs. It's all a bit excessive, no? I was just looking at a castle the other day. There was a castle that they say that it was like a jail, and they claim that, oh, it was built with, it was quarried on site and built by the very prisoners themselves. And it's like this ornate castle. They don't even try to make the stories believable. They know that they can come up with the most ridiculous stories, and people believe it because they know human psychology and they know people are gullible. And if an authority figure tells them so, 99% of people will think that's the truth. So you can stop this and read it if you want. It had a full-length statue of Alexander Hamilton. It's interesting, though, who were these people? Because I think a lot of these statues were around, and they had to make up new people. So I think that there was just this huge statue in there, and they probably knew who it was. Who knows? Maybe it was the leader of their enemy, and they have to make up some new backstory for him. I don't know what the real history is, but I've said this before where I think the Victorian era, I think the Victoria, I think it stands for being victorious. Sure, the Queen's name is Victoria, whatever, Victor or Victoria. And I think that they had been victorious in a war, and they had decided to do a new reset. I think that there's multiple points in history where human populations are decimated, and there's one controlling power. And what they do is they begin this whole charade. This has been done before, and I think they know it works to just falsify history and to pretend people live on a ball. And I think all of this stuff has been done before. And the people who are in control and they won the last Great War, I think they're like, all right, let's start it up again. Start up the machine. I think that this is a well-oiled machine by this point. Stately City Hall, which stood until the fire. What do you know of fire? Add Albany to the list of places that lost beautiful buildings because of a fire. Here, Tianus Van Vetchen, famous Albany attorney, took the oath of office. This is the taking the oath of office. Where are the people? How? The amount of people necessary to build a building like this has got to be hundreds and hundreds of people. And here somebody's taking the oath of office and there's like 5 people and a dog around. The dog looks like the closest person to the person taking the oath of office. What is even happening? Do you see how ridiculous this is? If you believe what they say, none of it makes sense. Look at this crisp photo, 1875. Looking empty, looking like a ghost town. This is when it had the dome. Oh, there's the fire. A lot of times, too, it almost looks like they added a bunch of stuff. Like, this crowd over here almost looks fake. Like, is that supposed to be a crowd? It almost looks like they decided later, hey, maybe we should add a few more people. And a lot of people have mentioned that in the old photos. So here's another thing I need to mention about old photography that is a total lie that they tell you. Well, it kind of has to do with the fact that it wasn't a new technology. Photo manipulation has always existed too. Probably since the beginning. Probably very soon after photography existed, photo manipulation also existed. And in a lot of the old photos, it's very clear when they're doing copy-paste jobs, like cutting out a photo of the bottom of a building and pasting it to the top photo, which is just a clear sky. You see that very obvious. A lot of people mention that they can see when they draw in figures. It'll be a far away photo of a city, and so I haven't spent a lot of time doing this, but I believe that they would do this. And I have seen drawn on stuff. And you can draw on film or paint on film. But anyways, a lot of crowds and people in the background look like an afterthought, like a painted in afterthought. Like, oh, we better pretend like there were hundreds of people there, not 25. Look at this photo. This photo is very strange. Looks like a band. It looks like Indiana Jones, but Greek themed. Like they walked upon an abandoned temple or something. But 1880, I think this is past. That must be after the fire. Because this is 1875 when it has that. Like, what was going on? Strange. That it burnt down and then this looks abandoned. I don't know what was happening here. Sled. People don't really ride around on sleds much these days in this area. Interesting. All the busted out windows. Our history is very interesting. What was going on exactly? It's just not what the history books say. History was always my least favorite class because I knew it was BS. I knew the stories that they said made no sense. I'd say that doesn't make sense. They'd explain how World War I happens, and I'd say that doesn't make sense. That's not why people go to war. And so much from history doesn't make sense. And when stuff doesn't make sense, it's because somebody's pulling one over on you. The truth makes sense. BS doesn't make any sense. And they've been shilling their BS for a long time. Power lines, though, telling you, they're quick with those power lines. They'll let the buildings fall, but the power lines go up really fast. What a fascinating picture. Hope you enjoyed this introductory video on resets. Let me know what your questions are, what you want me to elaborate on. God bless everyone.